Hello there, I'm Dominique St-Pierre, and you're listening to Go Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Lea Anthony, and guess what? We are talking about Wails. Before we dive into the interview, I'd like to remember people that there is a channel for the Go Podcast on Slack. So if you are, member of the Slack community, you can join. It's Go Podcast in one word, directly like that. So yeah, not much there. I'm not really good at maintaining that kind of community and whatnot. But I mean, yes. Maybe some people will do the talking, I guess, or I don't know. I'm looking at guests as well. So if you if you have a nice story to talk about related to Go and things like that, just reach out. I'm always looking for that. And on that, this is the interview with Lea. Hello there. So I have a guest today. I'm with Lea Anthony from the Wails project, actually. Thank you very much for joining me, Lea, today.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. It's really good to be here. How are you today?
Very good, very good. We have a crazy hour difference, so I mean, it will be interesting. My English might be bad at those hours. I'm in 4 p.m. for me, so yeah, we will see how it goes. But hopefully, you will talk most of the time.
Well, my brain's generally bad at this time of day, so I think we're probably equal.
Nice. So I would guess most of the Gophers already heard your name, or at least they heard the project Wails. But I'm interested a little bit about yourself. What is your background? How did you came across Go and things like that? What can you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm originally from a country called Wails. Complete coincidence. I was exposed to technology fairly early. My father was an electrical engineer, so I grew up in a house with PCB, etching tanks, transistors, components, and this stuff was like alien technology to me growing up. I was so fascinated by it all. A bit later on, we had our first computer, which is a Mattel Aquarius. So Mattel, the toy manufacturer?
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually created a computer early on. I think it was like 32K or something. Maybe it wasn't even that grand. So that was my first exposure to BASIC and to programming. Around that time, home computing was just starting, and so you'd get TV programs where you were introduced to BASIC and made blocks move around the screen and stuff. And honestly, it was just so fascinating to me. A bit later on, in my early teens, I got an Atari ST and became interested in 68K assembly for some reason. So I started learning that, and I got sort of dipped my toes into the demo scene a little bit. That's kind of like my programming background, where it all started. Beyond then, when I got into sort of career, I was introduced to, object-oriented programming, C++, Java, Python, and all of this sort of stuff. And it's interesting that during that time, to see how software engineering has evolved. Like, object-oriented programming back then was the silver bullet of software engineering. I'm not so sure these days. I think things evolve. So being introduced to sort of concepts, programming techniques, all that sort of stuff. It was interesting to find what I found really frustrating about that stuff. I'll give you an example. So C++, really powerful, really good. But the tooling around it was incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Having to decide which header file to bring in based on which operating system you were compiling for. All of that kind of stuff. I found that very frustrating. Same with Java. I found sort of like the layers and layers of abstractions extremely frustrating too. So anyway, this is relevant. Eventually I managed to find Go, basically. And all of the frustrations that I found in all of the other languages, and even in kind of like the way you approach software development, I felt like Go had really good answers to all of those things. And so, I think it was about 2016, I started becoming more interested in the language and getting to know how that works. Yeah, I thought it was just this amazing cross point between, the job that you need to do as a software developer, and like how much you're willing to invest in the time in doing it. I just thought it solved so many problems. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, pretty cool. So what was the electric engineering part of your decision at some point? Because I mean, before you started programming, was that on the table for you? Did you had any interest in that at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So when I went to college, so in Wales, you have like school up to 16, and then you can choose to go to college for a couple of years. Okay. And then I guess what you'd call college in the States, and maybe in Canada, we call university. So in that 2-year gap, I did a course called Software Engineering, Micro Electronic Engineering. There was some really cool things there to do with like building hardware and interacting with that using computers. So yeah, I think it was one of those things where I could have, but I was way more into the software. So that's kind of like what I did.
Nice. So is that still part of your interest these days? Because with Raspberry Pis and whatnot, I mean the hardware things, the Arduinos of and the kind of that. Do you play with that at the moment?
Do you know what? I'm one of those people who are very guilty of having a graveyard of Raspberry Pis in the. I think I've got every model, and I think I've probably used one of them once.
Yeah. Same. Unfortunately, yeah. I don't know why, but they are so cheap. Then it might be the reason.
I know. It's one of those things you think, well, it doesn't cost me much, and it would be really cool if I did all this stuff. And then you realize that the one thing you don't have is time.
I know. I've been telling my younger kids, we will build at some point a kind of an old arcade, machine or whatever how you want to call that. And unfortunately, it's still there. The components are there, but like you said.
Yeah, I hear you. I actually did build I did get an old arcade machine cabinet, and built out a Raspberry Pi based arcade. And then, just like there was an update, something went wrong. Eventually I just went onto AliExpress and found a box that I could just connect a monitor to and controls to, and it all worked. So,
yeah. Oh yeah, totally. So you dabble a little bit in Java and Python and things like that, and you found Go. That's interesting. So, are we talking career at this time? So were you working in a company that were using Go?
So no, at the time. So when I first started with C++, that was for a company that worked in the oil and gas industry. And my first project there was to take a standard, which was released by an organization called POSC. And this was like the world's largest data model at the time. And what that involved is reading the standard, generating code to create an application that would do automatic DB migrations. So that was a really interesting experience in learning all of the weirdness of C++, and also software engineering as well. Applying OOP principles to that was kind of interesting, and opened my eyes a little bit to what's good and what's not about it. Java professionally, Python, sort of used that in my own business, and I also used it for the time when I was a system administrator for about 7 years. So using it for tooling, automation, yeah. So that was pretty cool. My next job involving a programming language was Node, actually. So yeah, understanding the intricacies of using what I would consider a reasonably bad language for back end, and all of the problems that come with everything being async. That was difficult. So yeah, it was actually because of that I looked for a different language, and that's how I ended up in Go. Nice.
Yeah. I lived the back end. It was like the callback hell back then. When I discovered Go as well, it was from Node myself. I woke up at some point. I was working in a startup, a small SaaS, and I woke up at some point and I said, you know what, I'm rewriting that into Go right away.
Yeah, I think Go really lends itself to to that kind of scenario, where no developers can kind of get it quite quickly. For me, I think I was building an application for one of the US government departments, and they reported a bug, and I just couldn't reproduce this bug. Every time I would step through it to make sure everything was good. I just couldn't work it out. Turns out it was a race condition. Because of the asynchronous nature, it was a race condition. And the debugger just was masking this because of the timings. And yeah, that was something that really, really stuck out to me. Like, yeah, this isn't great.
Interesting. Yeah, never really thought about race condition and an error like that in Node. But yeah, now that you are opening this, that's pretty interesting. So no desktop application so far, if I'm understanding that correctly, right?
Correct.
Interesting.
So how do we get there? So my interest in Go had started, and I was really keen to learn it. I was really keen to understand it and how it worked in really deep dive. And at the time, I'd just taken a new job, and it was basically an hour and a half commute each way. I spent time on the train and trying to understand Go, deep diving it, understanding it more, really getting into it. And around that time, I got interested in like offline backups. And I discovered a program called Restic, which was written in Go. I think, yeah, most people are fairly familiar with that. The thing that frustrated me was there was no decent UI for it. So really, all I wanted to do was just build a UI for Restic. And because I'd done a lot of front-end stuff in startups, in the Node startup, I kind of want to use that technology. It seemed sort of like, best fitting for my skill set at the time. And I just couldn't figure out a way of doing it. One day I stumbled across a library called WebView. And what that is it's a C wrapper that wraps the native HTML WebView renderers on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And I thought, this is good. I wonder if I can interface this with Go. I wonder if I can use it from Go. And they did have I think a Go library, like to be able to use it, like what do you call it?
Binding?
Binding, that's it. It's too early. It's too early for me doing it. Oh yeah, they did have a Go binding for it. So I started looking into that. And it worked reasonably well. There were some bugs. But one of the things that I found quite quickly was that, it's very low level. There isn't a good way to communicate between the front and the back. Setting up a project is, cumbersome. I'm basically copy and pasting my code. And I started, for some reason, kind of thinking about developer experience. And this wasn't with the intent of releasing it. This, wasn't with the intent of creating an open source project. It really was just that theme that I guess I've had throughout my life in software engineering, which is just kind of trying to address frustrations. Go itself addresses a lot of the sort of build frustrations that I had. But when it comes to actually doing something, actually creating a piece of software, I really wanted to address the frustration of all of that boilerplate stuff that you needed to do. I was quite envious of the Ruby on Rails project. I thought that was really good, not necessarily technology-wise. Maybe it is. I just don't know. But I think in terms of the developer experience, I thought it was really good. So I kind of wanted to emulate that for this little, side project that I started. And yeah, that's where the name comes from. So it was kind of like WebView on Rails.
Nice. So yeah, okay. So that's cool. So what was that actually? So when you say you wanted to redo this a little bit, so were you looking at a new library instead of the WebView? So what were your plan at that time to output some kind of front end web application from a Go backend point of view?
Yes, there's a couple of problems that I need to address. One was like, how do I get assets, HTML, JavaScript? How do I get those files into the front end? Because we're not talking about a server. We're talking about just a straight Go program with no like network stack connectivity. So that was the first thing I had to try and work out. And the interface between the web views and the host, we'll call it the host, at that time is, well, actually, and still is to a large degree, mainly just passing strings. So the idea is that you could run, window.print, or you could run, console.log from the host to the web view. And the web view has the capability of posting strings back to the host. And so I found that to be, so really the first problem there is like, how do I make this easy? How do I have some sort of protocol built on top of this that makes my life easier so that I'm able to have that two-way communication? And I think another key thing to talk about here is that communication is asynchronous. So there is, at that time anyway, I think maybe WebView 2 has some synchronous calls now. I think that technology space has developed quite a lot. But at that time, it was all asynchronous. So, like, how do you call something and then wait for a response? How do you make that a bit easier for the developer? Because I've already been in node hell already. I don't want to have to reproduce that in Go. So that was the first thing that I did. And so to solve that, I really basically developed a protocol which was in JSON. So when you send a message to the back end, it would have like a method name and arguments, and then I utilized JavaScript's promises to kind of reflect what was happening on the back end. So if you wanted a synchronous call, you could call, I don't know, let's say a classic one would be greet. So I want to call a greet function in Go from the front end. You'd pass a message with the function name is greet. I'm passing the name Dominic, and then Go would return a string, and that method would also return an error in the signature, but that would obviously return hello Dominic as a string and a nil error. And what I did then was map that to a JavaScript promise. So it was kind of like utilizing JavaScript's promises to be able to understand whether the backend was erroring, whether that function was erroring or returning you a value. So that was the first major. Well, that was the second major thing I had to address after the assets. Yeah. So once I got there, it was a case of releasing kind of like the first version. I decided to open source it. I still don't know whether that was a good idea. I'll be honest. It's taken an awful lot of my time, this project, but I think it's good. I think I've seen some amazing things, happen with it, and people pick it up and run with it. And I don't know. I think it's one of those things you look back on and go, you know what? It was worth it. It was worth it. It's good.
Well, yeah, I suppose you can say that you don't have a choice today because there seems to be a lot of people. But let's unpack a little bit of what you just said. I'm not sure I'm fully understanding. So, are you saying that at this moment with the current version of Wails, you are still using promises to kind of handle errors that are returned from the Go function? But so from the JavaScript point of view, it's it looks like an async call, but even though it's just to have a good way to handle the value returned from the Go function and the error returned from the Go function?
That's correct, yep.
Interesting. Okay. So it's completely async. So you can call both ways, I guess. So can you call also a function from the Go code? Can you broadcast some kind of message to your JavaScript frontend and say, do X, for example, and that function reside in the JavaScript world?
Yeah, correct. You can call anything on the JavaScript side as if you were typing it in on the console in a browser. So it's probably worth unpacking what is Wails, I guess, because it's not just a web front end and the ability to send messages, because that's right. I mean, that's basically, we're talking about version 1. It also comes with a runtime library which has a whole bunch of different things that provide functionality. So one of those things, which you touched on there, was events. So you have the ability to, in Go or JavaScript, to emit an event give it a name, a string, which is the name, and any kind of data you want with it. And both sides will be able to pick up that event. So it's kind of like a unified event system.
Interesting.
So you can call JavaScript from Go using that. It's less. So what I would say is that events are more kind of fire and forget. They're sort of like status updates. Like if you're downloading a file and you need to know, you need to be pinged what percentage it is. Events are really good for that. Where you want a more where you want to handle a value and perhaps an error scenario, then calling functions is a much better approach. And you can do that from JavaScript to Go. You can't so much do it from Go to JavaScript.
Okay, so we have event. That's pretty interesting. So let me try to see if because I've never built anything in Wails, so I'm kind of a newbie in there. So are you saying that from an application developer point of view, so there's no HTTP involved whatsoever in typical Wails application, right? I'm building a front end. I'm building the code in the back end, but it will not be called from an HTTP request. It will be called, either from an event or from calling a function itself.
Correct. Correct. There is no HTTP involved. There is no network stack involved.
Interesting. Okay, so this is the primary building block that we have when we are going to use Wails. So are you still using this web view component today?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So you've built on top of that, you've built some kind of messaging protocol that we are able to call Go from JavaScript and vice versa. So what about what you were mentioning that it's way more than that, and I can understand that. So I understand that there's a couple of widget. Or maybe it's not the right word, but let's say there is UI component that an application developer can use. For example, I would guess the system tray maybe, or the menu bar in Mac and things like that. So do we have access to those things, and are they native from the OS point of view?
Yeah, correct. So I think where we've got to in our journey on what Wails is kind of like version 1. Very basic, didn't have any of that stuff, just gave you a standard window. Version 2 was released in 2022, and that gave you the ability to control the window a lot more. So like native menus, being able to resize the window, being able to understand when it's moving, full screen, center, all of that sort of stuff to control the native window. That was all made available, in version 2. In version... Sorry, you go on.
Yeah, I was going to say this code is cross-platform, I would assume, and it's not coming from this WebView library. So you wrote all of this. This is Wails.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that we found with WebView is that there was a couple of bugs that weren't getting addressed, and I found that the speed of the project was quite slow, which is fine. I don't I completely get it these days. But I think one of the things that I really wanted to do is to make sure that I was able to move as fast as possible and be able to implement things, as quickly as I could. And so what I decided to do, and this really is like the nerd part of my brain, I think, I think I'd really enjoy doing that. I think I'd really enjoy being able to write all of the C, Objective-C code to be able to interact with the native APIs, to be able to do all of this stuff. That was hard. Like, that was so hard.
Yeah.
But I think it was worth it. Like, we now have everything, within the Wails project. So if any of the new APIs come along, we can try and add them in as fast as we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's go back a little bit. So we were at version 1. So version 1, it was fairly simple. We could call both sides and things like that. So what happened at this time? What were you sensing any kind of pressure from the community? What was the popularity of the library or the project at that time exactly?
Yeah, so I think the thing about version 1 was that it was kind of popular to a degree because it was so simple, and it was more of a library. I mean, unfortunately for a desktop application, you always need to have it own the main loop, because a lot of UI operations have to happen on the main thread. So it can't just be a library in the traditional sense. So I think a lot of the Go community kind of weren't really sure about it. Desktop applications, Go, really. I think that's changed a lot over the years. But for version 2, what I wanted to do was to increase improve the developer experience. And so I think at that point I was just really driven by that rather than any pressure. I've never really felt pressured to do anything within the project. I think unnecessary pressure harms the project. Mm-hmm. So I think you just have to do with what you've got, and if that aligns with everybody else's requirements, then that's great. And if it doesn't, then everybody's free to contribute. It's an open source project.
Yeah, totally. Were you using the project in a commercial way, or it always has been a kind of a side project for you?
Yeah, it's been a side project for me and my family. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we are on version 2. You've added some SQL and things like that. So I would imagine that now that you rely on some C library, it means that we need CGO to compile the output of what Wails is going to create.
Yes. And that is a challenge. But I think CGO is. I mean, I think it's a little bit better than people think, and it's definitely a lot worse than it could be. I think the really cool thing, and I can't believe I'm saying this after kind of like my background is like Linux and Unix, but I have to say, developing this for Windows is the easiest. It's the easiest platform. I can't believe I'm saying this, and the main reason is because. For whatever reason, the Go developers created a syscall interface, which means that you don't need to use CGO. You can actually call all of the DLLs, which exist on the machine already, directly. So for the Windows part, CGO's not really been a problem, apart from like version 1. I've got to give a big shout out to John Chadwick, who created a library called Go WebView 2, and that really allowed us to use the WebView 2 component, which had subsequently been released after version 1 was released. And that allowed us to very easily integrate with WebView 2. It was kind of a bit of a proof of concept for him. So we helped develop that, some capabilities for that early on. So on the Windows side, no problem with the CGO. But like for Mac and Linux, very much so. We have to use CGO.
Interesting. So is when you say that let's say kernel 32 or user 32, whatever the DLL that you are using, when you say it's already there, it's not part of the standard library? Yeah.
So Windows, for better or worse, Windows has this huge long history of having these Win32 DLLs as part of the operating system, and so. What it means is that you can confidently call certain system operations because those DLLs are pre-installed on the operating system. Whereas, let's say Linux, you may have one version of a library, you may have another version of a library. The library may not even be there, and so it's much harder to kind of handle those edge cases because your target platform is so variable.
Yeah, totally. So I guess on Linux you need to do some static linking probably and include some library yourself, or Or it's during the build, depending on what is on the developer system?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no easy answer to this. I mean, it's partly a distribution problem. So if you could develop with the library, you could install the libraries locally, you can link against them and stuff, but how do you know that those libraries are going to exist on the target platform? And the answer is you don't. So it's a distribution problem. Either you're going to have to like create deb files or deb packages or RPM packages, or even something like app image that allows you to kind of ship the DLLs with it, or shared libraries with it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Interesting. Okay, so as a developer myself, do I need to do extra steps when comes times to package my my Wails application for multi-platform? Because I see that you have a CLI and things like that, and it seems to be able to build. Is it able to build cross-platform, from anywhere?
Yes and no. So Apple have this wonderful legal clause where you can't use their SDKs on other platforms, and you can't redistribute them. Okay. So other projects have this limitation as well, and there are ways around it. Like you can build your own Docker image using your own version of Xcode, but yeah, for the other platforms, you can compile to Windows from either Mac or Linux, and obviously Windows. We do have a system to be able to compile Linux from Windows and Mac, which uses a Docker image. But yeah, compiling to Mac is a problem. I don't think there's a good solution for that yet, which doesn't involve a lot of stuff for the developer.
Okay. So if I want to distribute my application on Mac, I need to have a Mac and build there.
So fortunately, GitHub Actions allows you to build Mac apps. So you could do it through GitHub
Interesting.
Actions.
Oh yeah, I did not knew that. Wow. That's interesting. Okay, there are so many things. Okay, so where are we today? So you were mentioning you have integrated yourself with some C library and UI component. Is there anything missing from your point of view? Are you using Wails yourself to build any kind of application?
I normally use Wails to build applications to trigger bugs whilst I'm triaging bugs. That's my main use of Wails these days. We do use, so the company I work for actually uses Wails internally for a couple of projects, and so I have done a bit of work with them on there. Where are we today? So version 2 of the project, which is the current stable version, that provides a lot of functionality, as we've spoken about, in terms of the window, in terms of the CLI tooling, in terms of kind of like hiding the build process, the complexities of the build process, which we've also touched on. It makes it very opaque to the developer. So you can just type in Wails build and it will sort it all out. If you type in Wails package, it will create native packages for your system. So on a Mac, it will be a .app bundle, and for Windows, it will compile all the resources into an exe. So you just have this single binary that will run on these platforms. When we got to a particular point with version 2, it became clear that some of those benefits, some of those things that kind of like where we hide the complexity from the developer, they were kind of working against us. So one of the things was, if we first talk about the API. So in version 2, it's very simple. Your main program is very, very simple. You create an application, you give it some config, and in that config you can say where you want your window to be, how big you want it to be, what bundle where your files are. You can configure some platform specific stuff, like on Mac you'll have some options, on Windows you'll have some options, and then you run it, and that's it. That's kind of how it works. And one of the things we found was people kind of want to be able to do things more programmatically, because that kind of setup it's really cool for a single window application, but it's a little bit fire and forget. For instance, you don't have a handle to that window because there's no concept of the window within the library. It's kind of hidden away for you. So one of the things we wanted to address in version 3 was like, how can we change this API so that make it more programmatic? So when we talk about a window, we need to be able to kind of address that as a separate thing to the application. And really like a system tray too. If I want to create a new system tray, it seems reasonable for me to say, create a new system tray, attach a window to it, attach a menu to it. Here are the callbacks. And to do that programmatically, config gets you so far. But yeah, really the feedback we got was that people wanted the power and the control over how these things interacted. And, good example is, can we get a native window handle because we want to add our own native widget on top of it, like an overlay. So that's really what we've been steering towards. Unfortunately, it kind of means that you're rebuilding it, like honestly, because you're taking the guts of what you've got and works, and you're kind of refactoring it and reframing it in to a different API. It's been incredibly hard work. We're getting there. That's kind of the direction in terms of the API we're heading.
Wow, yeah, okay, that's a major overhaul, or at least a huge update. So this concept of Windows handle is common to Mac and Linux as well, because if I recall, I did some desktop window development in other life, and I remember that. But yes, is this concept also the same on Linux and Mac?
Sorry, could you rephrase the question?
The window. You were talking about the window handle. I guess it's the kind of the ID that the OS knows that this is the window that we are talking about. Maybe I understood incorrectly, or
no, that's correct. Okay. It's completely cross-platform. Yeah, so the same API will work for Windows, Linux, and Mac. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So what about let's dive in a little bit inside a typical application, for instance. So I would imagine that do I have a structure already where I can put some, I don't know, CSS and JavaScript file and things like that, or it's more flexible than that? Do I have some standard already, or when I start an application, or it's mainly flexible?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what when you first create an application. So as part of Wails, you get a CLI. And so the CLI, you can create you can scaffold out a basic project. And there's a number of templates that we have, with different front end libraries. So, there's a React template, a vanilla JS template, Vue. And when you build that out, you kind of have two parts to your project. One is kind of like your front end, and that lives in a front end directory. And the rest is kind of outside of that, and that's just a standard Go project. The way that you can provide those front end resources. So if you imagine like that front end directory, it's almost like you've done like created a front end project using React Create or whatever tooling you use. So if you imagine that as part of a normal front end build system, you would you'd compile it, you'd bundle it, and you'd kind of end up with a bunch of assets. So you'd have JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and you'd end up with those files. One of the early challenges in Wails was, how do I get that to the front end? And initially that was just sending it via strings. What we've managed to do is reuse the concept of embed in Go. So now you can embed. Are you familiar with embed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that embed does, it gives you an FS object. Mm-hmm. So what we've done is we've been able to use an FS object as the source for your assets. So it's entirely up to you how you create that. By default, we have it integrated as an embed line in the code. So you have var assets is as an embed.fs, and then you include in the comment above, you include the distribution directory of the front end, and so basically that will just take all of your front end files, bundle it all up into an asset fs. And Wails will accept the fs, and then anytime it requests a file, it looks for it inside that fs bundle. So by default, it's kind of set up for you, but it's flexible enough that if you want to use something else, you can. I do know one commercial project. They use, I think it's Squash FS. So they actually, download a Squash FS remotely and use that as the assets, and that's how they do updates.
Nice. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So we have that. So from there, it's we can do whatever we want from the front end point of view. So it's not involved at all in the build process of the front end project.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's good. So from there, so you have so I've read somewhere that there were some automatic typing from for TypeScript for the function that can be called from JavaScript.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Dominic. It's this is one of the big things about the project. One of the major things I'm probably most proud of. We discussed earlier about sending those strings as protocols between the front end and back end and having to do that. One of the things that obviously I've majored on is developer experience, and honestly, that's just no good for me. So what I wanted to do is to be able to indicate in a Wails project that here is a struct. It has some information. It has some methods. I want to be able to interact with that from the front end, just like I want to do that from the back end. So for version 2, what we did was we built a mechanism that when you compile your project, the first thing it does is it compiles it with a bindings tag, a build tag. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it kind of layers, it sort of patches your application so that when it runs it initially, it uses reflection to determine which Go structs are bound to the application, to the front end, and then generate JavaScript wrappers or bindings for those calls. So we use reflection to discover which methods are bound to the front end, and it generates JavaScript files which contain wrappers. And so what you can do from the front end is you can just import the file. And you can import the functions as if they were just JavaScript functions, but they mirror the Go ones one for one. And so you can call those from the front end and receive either a value or an error back. So none of that kind of plumbing you need to do. It's done automatically for you. That method of using reflection was pretty good. It's okay. You miss a few things, like you don't get the comments from the code, you don't get the argument names in the signatures. You just get the method names and the number of arguments that there are and their types. So it was a little bit limited, but it was very powerful. And it does allow you to move quickly. If you add a function in the back end, you just recompile, and then your JavaScript's updated. You now have new JavaScript functions that you can import and call straight away. So that actually leads me on to where we're going with that with version 3. So I've already spoken about the problems with that in terms of using reflection. It does add to the build time. We're very fortunate to have a community member who contributed a static, a new parser and code generator, which uses static analysis. So with version 3, you can basically bind these structs to your application, and then it will search through, work out exactly what they are ahead of time, and be able to generate those files for you. So it's much more powerful than than the version 2 bindings generator. It does keep your comments. It automatically creates JS doc types comments so that you're able to get your IDE to, pick that up. Argument names, everything. It's just like Go code, but now it's in the front end.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it basically creates a JavaScript module from mimicking what's in there, right?
Yeah, correct.
So and the only thing that we need to do is to apply a build tag on that Go file.
No, you don't need to do that. It does. So I guess that was version 2. Version 2 kind of did that behind the scenes. So that was kind of like just the mechanism it used to be able to kind of patch it to read the bound structs via reflection. For version 3, I guess it's worth talking about the build system. Because, generating bindings was kind of automatic as part of the build in version 2. A lot of the feedback we got from that was it was far too opaque. Like, people just didn't know what it was doing. There may have been certain flags which we weren't passing through to the Go compiler. And so you kind of end up, basically recreating all of the flags and everything for the Go compiler within your tooling. That led to a lot of bugs, a lot of tickets. So what we decided to do was listen to the community and talk about using an external build system. And I guess it's highly contentious. Some people love Make, some people hate Make. So we looked around for a Go based project that kind of solved that problem. The one that we kind of settled on was Task. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Task.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
So the developers there, they're really, really great. I had a conversation with them about being able to use it as a library, so that we could incorporate it as part of the Wails CLI. And they were very open. They were very happy to help with that. We support them, we sponsor them, like we do most projects that we rely on. So with the Wails 3 CLI now, you actually have the build system as part of the CLI. And when you generate a project, you have default task files for the different platforms, and you've got common tasks. And so everything is completely exposed. How you're calling the Go compiler, which order you're doing these things in, what are the tags that you're passing in. So we provide that as a default. So you can just basically run, Wails 3 build, and it's going to do exactly what version 2 did, except now it's using task under the hood, and it's using the task files on how, to execute those commands and build it. And it gives us a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of optimizations it does. It fingerprints files. It caches a lot of stuff. It's really fantastic. But, to be clear, you're not limited to using tasks. You don't have to use that build system. You can use a completely different build system. That's absolutely fine. So as part of those files that you get as a Wails 3 project, the bindings generator is called in that. And so then you're able to customize that as much as you want as well. You can call it when you want. It doesn't have to be part of build. It can just be part of development.
And how this binding generator knows what struct and what function to output into JavaScript?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as part of the application configuration, you're able to define those structs, and it uses that to discover what those things are. One of the key things as well that we've moved to in version 3 is we've moved away from this concept of like they're just structs, and we're calling them services. And the difference between structs and services is when you bind a service, there are certain functions that it would kind of look for. So if it conforms to a particular interface, then it will call those functions. So there's like application lifecycle functions. So at the start, you may want to call some initialization functions as part of your service. That will happen automatically. Same for shutdown. But one of the key new things as part of it is we recognize the serve HTTP function. Do you know the kind of standard serve HTTP function? Yeah. If your service has that method, then given a particular path as part of the config to the service, it will mount it in your front end, so it becomes accessible on a path in your front end. And what this means is that you can develop essentially plugins where you can provide functionality to the front end with very, very little, what's the word? Effort. You can provide functionality to the front end with very, very little effort. So let's say, as an example, you've got a QR code generator. You may release a service that does that. And when you consume the service as a Go module, you can say, right, as part of my services in my application, I want to use this QR code generator, and I want the accessible path from the front end to be, /QR. And then in your front end code, you can call /QR and whatever paths that the QR code generator provides you. Maybe it's just, maybe it just accepts the path parameters. The URL parameters, the ones with the question mark and whatever.
Query string.
The query string. That's the word. See, it's too early, Dominic. It can read the query string. That's provided, for you, and then it can return an image. And so now you can use in your front end. You could use like an image tag and just point it.
Oh yeah, okay,
straight to it.
Yeah. Now I get you. Okay, so and there's no HTTP involved at all. Nowhere.
No.
Okay.
No.
Huh. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that is coming with the V3 version that you are working on.
Yes, correct.
Nice.
Yeah, we're hoping that will help people with things like OAuth, for instance, where you need callbacks. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, this is an exclusive for you, but we're probably
nice.
we're probably going to do a competition during the beta phase for who can come up with the best services for V3, and there'll be some pretty good prizes.
Nice. So where are people can know about that? Do you where is the community hanging out?
Yeah, so we've got a Discord server. We used to have a Slack server, and I found that the interaction there was actually quite slow and muted. Since moving to Discord, it's just absolutely thrived for whatever reason. Yeah, so we do have a Discord community that you can join. It's at the bottom of the Wails.io webpage. If you're interested in V3 specifically, there is a v3alpha.wails.io website, and you can use that to get a bit of information about V3. It is alpha.
Nice.
It is constantly evolving. The docs may be wrong, but yeah, if you just hop onto Discord, we're all pretty friendly. We can chat about things.
Very cool. Well, yeah, it sounds pretty interesting. Yeah. I wasn't sure I was understanding the service part, but with the QR code example, it makes sense. Seems to be great. So anything you want to add at this point? Can we expect a early next year release? When do you have any kind of ballpark idea for the V3 release?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah. Right.
The official answer is it'll be released when it's ready.
Nice.
There's a few things like coming from V2 to V3. There are certain things that people need, and so there is kind of there is a porting effort, involved.
Yeah.
There are certain things which we've had to think long and hard about. I really don't ever want to have to go through this again, so I need to make sure that we make as many right decisions as possible. So yeah, I think we're getting really close. Like it seems to be that there's just some minor features and incompatibilities that we're struggling with. Partly kind of like the parity between the OSes. So for instance, the system tray menu, which we're supporting, like on Linux, you can't tell which button you've pressed, on it. So then you don't know whether it's left click or right click, and like how do you manage that? There's a few little things that we need to figure out, and there's some features that need to be ported. But yeah, like we're getting close. We're getting close. I'm hoping very early next year.
Nice.
We should be at the beta release phase. Yeah.
How does it work when it's a call from a, you were mentioning the tray, and I guess the menu bar is the same. Who's got call exactly? Is it a Go function, or is the it's somewhere in JavaScript that gets called when those things happen?
No, so it's all in Go. It's all in Go. And I think as a general rule, the way that we suggest that you build Wails applications is that the UI is just UI. Like you probably shouldn't be keeping state there. There's enough mechanisms to move state from Go into JavaScript to not keep it in JavaScript. So anything to do with the window, all of the native components like the menus, the trays, it's all in Go. So you can just create one. As part of your menu, you can have a callback back into Go. It's all in Go basically. The thing that you use the JavaScript is just the UI.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And what about comparing that to Tori maybe? And I don't know if there's anything else other than what's the name? I'm forgetting about the name. The Electron, right? So I would assume that it's extremely more lightweight than Electron, for example.
It is. It generally is. Yeah, it depends on what you do. I mean, you can definitely make a heavyweight program in any technology. But yeah, it doesn't come bundled with a browser. And I think that's some of the misconceptions of the stack. It doesn't open an HTTP server, and it doesn't come with a browser. And one of the difficulties we had early on, because Wails comes with a development mode. I don't even think we spoke about that. But basically, when you run it in development mode, it will hot reload your front end, and it will recompile your back end if you change your Go code. So you have this kind of fast development iteration. And yeah, one of the things that we found was, or one of the things we were able to offer was being able to call your back end from a browser. So you could connect to a port and with a browser and develop that way. So then you could use your React plugins or whatever. The big problem we found with that was that the browser APIs are not the same as WebView APIs. WebViews generally lag behind it a little bit. And so we found that there was a lot of tickets getting raised for, why does my local storage, work in development mode and not in production, when I do a build in production mode. So for V3, we're kind of trying to steer away from that a little bit and saying, when you develop, you have the application there. You do have developer tools there. But yeah, I think it's probably more trouble than it's worth to be able to. I mean, it's cool. I can't tell you how cool it is that you just connect to a port and see your desktop application in Chrome, and then go in your dev tools and start calling Go code from it. It's supremely cool. But at the end of the day, it gives you a kind of a false sense of what your application can do. Yeah. But yeah.
Oh yeah, interesting. Okay, so you are kind of moving away from that in V3, if I understood?
Yeah, so the thing about using the extensions in Chrome, I mean, really what you're using that for is front end. And so as part of the development, mode, it actually opens up a Vite development mode. Okay. And so you're able to connect to that using a browser and still use your extensions to do the UI work. The thing that we are recommending is that you only, you can still do that, but we recommend that you do it through the application to make sure that it is actually working. So doing the UI stuff, that's fine. But anything that sort of starts using, JavaScript APIs and stuff, kind of like we're throwing caution at that.
Right. Yeah, sounds pretty interesting, very exciting. I would even say, of course, one thing that I do appreciate about Wails is all the accessibility that that comes with the the application UI being from the browser. So I mean, it's very nice because I received Andy from Fine a couple of weeks ago, and yes, the issue with desktop sometimes is that our native desktop UI is that they are not accessible. So it's nice. It's nice to have that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, everything has their pros and cons, and I get on with Andy really well. I think he's got a great project there. But yeah, I'm sure he suffers like different problems coming from that angle as well. But I think people have different needs, and there's different technologies for those solutions. So yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
I mean, it's great. It's great. I would assume. Do you have any example that when you saw that being released, you said, "Wow, they are using Wails," and I'm kind of proud of what I built, because you did build something extremely great. I mean, there's a lot of love around Wails. There's a lot of it's always positive when I see someone talking about that. So do you have an example?
There's been a few. I mean, I think it was about 4 weeks after I released the V1 alpha or beta. A guy, Alex, I can't remember his surname unfortunately, but have you heard of Package Mate?
Oh yeah,
he's yeah. So he did a video on the first version when it was first released, and it was so positive. And honestly, I just came back from work and I saw it pop up on YouTube, and I was like, "What the hell? Like, nice. What is this?" And I was just blown away. I was like, "Wow, that's just incredible." And Alex has reached out recently to kind of do an update, which I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, he really instilled that thing in me of like, oh my god, like this is happening. This is going somewhere. But there's also been like a few blog posts as well that I've just stumbled upon. There was one by Twilio. There was one on IBM.
Wow.
Yeah, like it's just like it's crazy. And there are like some commercial applications as well, which has also kind of contributed to that feeling of maybe this was good. So there's a keyboard company, which you may be familiar with, ZSA. They do the EasyDocs keyboards, the split key. Is it Moonlander? I think it's called.
Oh yeah.
So they used version 1 to create a firmware flasher, and it was a little bit limited back in the day.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it was called Wally, and it was really good. And when I saw that, I was like, this is exactly what it's for. Back end. Low level Go applications, but with a really nice UI. They since have developed a commercial version of the firmware flasher. It's called Keymapper, and they ship that with every ZSA keyboard. It comes with Keymapper. They're huge supporters of the project.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can't thank them enough for their contributions to the project. That's just been absolutely amazing. Another one was there was a blog post that somebody pointed me to, and there was a company, they'd built I think it was a Laravel debugger or PHP debugger.
Okay.
It was through a Laravel. I think it's called Crater, and they ported their application from Tory to Wails, and they did it in a weekend. And when I read that, I was like, "This is incredible."
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just a really incredible thing to read, because not only did it kind of like validate the use case for Wails, but also the developer experience as well. And honestly, that's really been a major thing in the project. There's one open source project as well I've got to mention. It's TinyRDM. It's actually a Redis manager. They have so many stars. Like it's crazy. They're doing such an amazing job. It looks good. It works really well. So yeah, anybody using Redis, check out TinyRDM.
Huh? It's like a UI for your Redis database.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's really good.
Interesting. Oh wow. Yeah, this sounds great. Congratulations to you. I mean, this is this is very hard to reach what you have you have done and where you are going as well. I mean, be proud of that. It's not easy to do.
I appreciate that, Dominic. Yeah, it definitely is not easy. There is so much time and effort spent in things that people don't see, just to make sure that things work well, for the project. So yeah, thank you.
Very cool, very cool. So thank you for your time. We will have all of that in the links and the show notes and whatnot. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. It was great.
I really appreciate it, Dominic. It's been fun.
All right.
Take care.
All right, that's it for this week. I would really appreciate if you can talk or share about this podcast. It's always helpful. Also, another way to support this show is by purchasing my course. There's always a link in the show notes. So on that, see you next week.